Scanner's pretty dead, so let's find something to put on in the background.
Wait, so messy.
Trying to figure out what you got in your hand right now because I can see something in it.
And that's where the one was shot. Notice the difference in what happened there as opposed to what happened in Okaloosa. Make no mistake, they have been trained and are still being trained themselves. Fully prepared. You've committed no crime. They're prepared. And they feel scared. Does the law allow them afraid of you and afraid of guns? No need to list the cops who have no legal training cases where my clients have been shot by the police who show up at their front door. I've even had a client who was shot through his front door by police. Settlement in that case, and to be honest, I've lost these cases too because they are very difficult cases. So here's the deal. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about why this most recent tragic shooting in Florida was unconstitutional in my opinion. And I'll show you a couple others, including where I just got the footage today where it was an old lady who was shot and killed at her front door, also in Florida.
Well, I'm just a little trying to figure out what you got in your hand right now because I can see something in it.
Morning, Brennan.
I'm also going to tell you some things that very well may save your life pertaining to this scenario. If a police officer knocks on your door and you answer the door with a gun, that officer has to reasonably believe that you are about to shoot him in order to lawfully shoot you. The Supreme Court said in Tennessee versus Garner that before shooting you, a police officer must give a warning if feasible. Wasn't that the entire problem with what happened in Okaloosa, Florida? The cop just immediately shot the homeowner with no warning, with no chance for him to even drop the gun that he wasn't even pointing at the officer. So when is it unfeasible to give a warning and just shoot immediately when the officer sees a gun? Well, that depends. So an innocent 23-year-old American service member was shot by a scared police officer. Obviously, that trigger should not have been pulled, right? But have you noticed that police officers around the country have been jumping to the defense of this tragic shooting? Make no mistake, they have been trained and are still being trained that it's better to kill an innocent homeowner than to even take the chance of being shot themselves. Police officers have created an us versus them mentality, along with a warrior culture mentality, where they are literally training to kill you as if you were an enemy combatant. I discussed this in my recent video about the street cop training seminars, which in New Jersey resulted in the mandatory retraining of thousands of police officers who were exposed to the toxic and incorrect so-called training.
I'm not the guy who's I'm a citizen of the United States under 12 6. Shut the right. Let me get pepper spray, tase, windows broke out, mother.
South, just go Wawa, west, south, wherever. You don't believe me? Run for Georgia State Patrol. Run for me. Somewhere along the chase becomes neither confirm or deny there's some videos out there with me doing just that.
A Reserve West Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's deputy who shot into the back of a fleeing car is facing charges tonight. Sean Mordazzi was fired in February, months after the initial incident took place. He's now facing charges of illegal discharge of a firearm and obstruction of justice.
But it's nothing new, as we've seen from longtime cop trainer Colonel Grossman, who has said things like this to cops he's trained for years.
If you fully prepare yourself, in most cases, killing is just not that big a deal. For a mature warrior who's prepared themselves mind, body, spirit for a lifetime, for a mature warrior who's killing somebody represents a clear and present danger to others, it's just not that big a deal. There's no wrong way to respond to killing. There's many ways people respond and they're all the same. They're all okay. But if you could choose how you responded, I think you'd want to feel good about it, yeah? The satisfaction of hitting the target under the stress of combat, to do what you're trained to do, to stop a deadly force threat, to save lives, to save your own life. Some call it survive euphoria. It feels real good. Some people feel bad, they don't feel bad. Yeah. Some people feel bad, they feel good about it. Yeah.
In this most recent tragic shooting, they've seen how upset the public is about it, and they feel threatened by that. Why? They want to be able to have the absolute right to shoot you dead if they even see a gun near you. It's been happening more and more. This violent and authoritarian mindset is at odds with our existence as a constitutional republic of free men who exercise the right to bear arms, especially within the confines of our own homes. In such a free society, it can never be reasonable for police officers to just execute you merely because you're armed, and you theoretically could harm them first if you wanted to do so. Our Second Amendment rights and Fourth Amendment rights were enshrined to us in 1791. There was no coward police officer exception included in either one of the amendments in the Bill of Rights. The Second Amendment doesn't say you have the right to, unless some police officer feels threatened by you. The Fourth Amendment doesn't say that you have the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures unless some Karen tells a police officer that she feels threatened. We're talking two things here. One is what should you do, and the other is what is the law. For what you should do, I highly recommend watching this YouTube video by firearms expert who does this very thing. I'll link the video in the main points, and they may save your life. So it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and somebody's banging on your front door. What do? One, you ask yourself, what the hell are you answering the door for at 3 a.m.? To begin with, if you're not expecting anybody.
And I ask myself, what the hell are you answering the door for at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're not expecting anybody? Why on earth would you open that door to begin with? And second, do you realize who is the single person most likely to be at that door?
The biggest likelihood there is that it's the police. And it could be for any number of reasons. If it's the cops and you have a gun in your hand, they very well may shoot you. So just don't open the door. Number two, utilize a Ring doorbell type camera in lieu of opening the door. Number three, if you do answer the door and arm yourself, keep the gun completely out of sight. Number four, call 911 in lieu of opening the door. Do you have a cell phone on you? Very different is the question if you do answer the door, armed with a gun, and if the police shoot you, is that constitutional or is it not constitutional? Either way, you're already dead. By now, we've all seen the video of the shooting of the 23-year-old airman in Okaloosa. I did a video as well on that. But here's another one that I just saw for the first time today. An 81-year-old woman killed by a police officer right at her front door in Wildwood, Florida. This has to do with mental issues. This 81-year-old woman, Janet Sowers, had requested help, requested emergency personnel at her mobile home park in Wildwood around 11 p.m. She said she was in distress and was having a mental episode. She told dispatchers on the phone that people were dying over here, triggering rescue personnel to stage the area until the scene could be secured by the deputies. When the deputies arrived and they began to investigate this 911 call, they spoke with Ms. Sowers and they tried to determine if her complaint was real or if she was just having a mental episode. This was Sumter County Sheriff's Office. And that's when the woman ends up pulling a knife from behind her back, lunging at the deputy who's at the front door, and she gets shot.
Of course. That's where the Villages is.
I'm trying to slam the door on me. What are you saying?
Heyo. I'm going to try and do another mobile stream on my desktop using Rumble Studio. They have a mobile version of it now. And I'm going to see if I can get that to work. So we'll see. So I'm going to do similar to what I did Friday. I really can't do much of a desktop stream until the internet gets better.
You don't like the lights on?
10:30 or 10 o'clock probably.
I'm trying to help you here.
Should get there around 9:30.
Where's that at? By the gate? You want to come show us? Oh, okay. Alright, what are you holding in your hand? What's that? No, I'm asking what you're holding in your hand, James. Well, you're holding your hand behind you, that's why I'm kind of nervous. Okay. Okay. Well, I'm just a little trying to figure out what you got in your hand right now because I can see something in it.
That's where the woman was shot. Notice the difference in what happened there as opposed to what happened in Okaloosa. Here, the deputy knew that he was going into a potentially dangerous situation, but his job is to protect and serve. He didn't want to unnecessarily kill an old lady. At the end of the day, she came at him with a knife. Now, others may say, well, if she had a gun, it may have been too late. Yeah, it would be safe if you just shot everybody that you encountered. Like, you would go home safe. Everybody.
Up there, yeah, almost 90 today. I think it's supposed to be. Whoa.
Just to be safe.
Oh, it's just the top lights. I thought he had a signal on.
Anyone could shoot you first.
That's dangerous as fuck. Fucking trailer on a flatbed.
Freedom is scary. This is America. We have a
Is that even a secure load?
Allowed to be armed in their home. You should assume that
That's crazy.
if you're afraid of confronting that scenario, unlike the UPS guy, unlike the post office guy, unlike the FedEx guy, unlike the guy who reads the power meter, then don't do that job. Now, all of these shootings that occurred in Florida. Florida is in the 11th Circuit, and we only need to go back a couple of years to another tragic case that I made a video about back when this happened that provides really most of the answers to these questions that you need to know. The case is Powell versus Snook. And again, 11th Circuit, the opinion was issued in 2022, just after midnight one evening in June of 2016 in Henry County, Georgia, which is also in the 11th Circuit. A police sergeant named Patrick Snook, who was at the wrong house because of imprecise dispatch directions, shot and killed William David Powell, who was innocent of any crime and standing in his own driveway. He was holding a pistol because he and his wife thought that they heard a prowler, and he walked out of his garage to see what was going on. It was about 5 minutes before midnight on June 7th. A 911 operator spoke to a caller who reported hearing a woman's scream and 3 gunshots. The caller gave her address as 736 Swan Lake Road and said the noises were coming from a few houses down. She also said that she had called 911 on an earlier occasion because they were fighting so bad. The operator searched the 911 call history for 736 Swan Lake, but did not find a record of that earlier call. The caller said that her mother had heard the woman scream, "Help me please," and then nothing else. After that, the operator asked the caller for the nearest intersecting street. She answered Fairview Road and added that the screaming and gunshots had come from the second or third house past hers towards Fairview. The operator asked a follow-up question. If I'm looking at your house, where exactly? When the caller said it was a couple houses down on the right towards Fairview Road. But the operator wrote in her report only that if a person were looking at the caller's house, the noises had come from 2 or possibly 3 houses down to the right. She omitted the caller's more helpful and less vague direction about the noises being towards Fairview. That is where the seeds of tragedy were sown. Based on the operator's report, a 911 dispatcher sent police officers to 736 Swan Lake, explaining that if they were looking at this location, it's 2 houses down on the right and maybe 3 houses. Officer Snook, who was in charge of the Uniform Patrol Division that shift, responded to the call with officers Matthew Davis and Ashley Ramsey. On the way to Swan Lake, Snook asked dispatch if he could find the address for the place where the disturbance had actually occurred. A 911 call center supervisor who replaced the earlier dispatcher during the midnight shift change replied that dispatch thought it was either 690 or 634. The Powells lived at 690 Swan Lake. The 3 officers who parked their cars along the road with their blue lights off. From the perspective of a person standing on Swan Lake Road and looking at House 736, the Powell's house is to the right and towards Gardner Road. Based on the 911 dispatch information, the officers approached the Powell's house, which could not be seen from the road because it had a long driveway. As the officers walked down that long driveway, there were no lights on the inside or outside of the house. It was very dark. Because they were going to a call involving domestic violence with shots fired, the officers approached cautiously, trying to avoid being targets for a shooter. Officer Snook carried a rifle because of the dangerous circumstances and in case a long-range fire was necessary. There were 2 trucks at the house, which the supervisor told Snook were registered to the Powells, a couple in their 60s. The supervisor also told Snook that previous 911 calls for the Powell's house had involved an alarm and an ambulance. Snook knew from his experience that alarm or ambulance calls sometimes domestic violence incidents, but he also knew because the supervisor had told him that police had not been dispatched to the Powell's house before for a domestic violence incident. Snook sent Ramsey to cover the back of the house while he and Davis stayed out front. Snook was close to the driveway area. He took his flashlight to look in the windows, but he didn't see any damage or lights on the inside of the house and didn't hear any screaming. Sharon Powell, who was inside, didn't hear any knocks on her door or rings of her doorbell, but she did hear her dogs barking, which had awakened her and David. The 2 of them got out of bed but did not check their front door. Instead, David Powell went to the laundry room door, looked out the window, and told Sharon that he saw someone outside. He went to his closet, put on his pants, and got his pistol. He then walked through a kitchen door into an attached garage and pushed a button. It caused the garage door to begin opening and the garage light to come on. All the other house lights were still on. It takes the garage door 8.8 seconds to open. When the door had fully opened, David walked out onto the driveway holding the loaded pistol in his right hand. After walking 10 to 15 steps at a normal pace, which took about 9 seconds, he stopped and he turned to face the walkway leading up to his front door, which is where Officer Snook was positioned in the darkness. When David Powell stopped walking, he was standing straight up and his arms were pointed straight down with the pistol in his right hand. Sharon Powell had followed David onto the driveway and stood 4 or 5 feet behind him. She was facing his right side, focused on him, watching him. She heard no noise or voice, either while the garage door was opening or after she and her husband went outside. She specifically did not hear anyone identify themselves as police officers. It was perfectly quiet. Sharon Powell had a sense that David was looking at someone. He started to raise his right arm, the one that was holding the pistol, and he got the pistol hip high. While David was doing that, Snook went down to one knee to make himself a smaller target and rapidly fired 3 shots with his rifle. Sharon testified that only a very short time, like 1 second it felt like, passed between when David started to raise his gun and when Snook began firing. After Snook fired, David dropped to the ground. Sharon screamed, ran into the house, locked the door, and called 911. The officers on the scene aided David and called for an ambulance that took him to the hospital, but he died the next day. And those were the facts, as found by the judiciary in the Snook case. Now, against those facts, this was the legal standard the court used and still uses. The law does not require officers in a tense and dangerous situation to wait until the moment that a suspect uses a deadly weapon to act to stop the suspect. Instead, an officer may use deadly force when he has probable cause to believe that the suspect poses a threat of serious physical harm either to the officer or to others, i.e. he's going to shoot him, and has given some warning about the possible use of deadly force if feasible. So in other words, an officer has to believe that this homeowner is going to imminently shoot him and give a warning if feasible. It is a reasonableness standard. The court said that there's no magical on-off switch that triggers rigid preconditions of whenever an officer can shoot somebody. It is very, very fact specific. Where officers shoot somebody who has a gun, there's no rigid rule that you can shoot somebody with a gun or you cannot shoot somebody with a gun. While the mere presence of a gun or other weapon is not enough by itself to warrant the exercise of deadly force, when a suspect's gun is available for ready use, Even when the suspect has not yet drawn his gun, an officer is not required to wait and hope for the best. Here's how the court analyzed those facts. From Officer Snook's perspective, he and his fellow officers had responded to a 911 report of domestic violence involving multiple gunshots and expected to find a suspect who had been violent before. A man came out into the driveway after midnight holding a pistol in his right hand. After 9 seconds of walking, during which he carried the pistol but kept it pointed at the ground, the man stopped and faced the walkway leading up to the front door, where Snook was positioned in the dark. While facing Snook, the man started to raise the pistol. Only a very short time, about 1 second, passed between the man starting to raise the pistol and Snook firing. The court said when Mr. Powell started to raise his pistol while facing Officer Snook's direction, Snook had the authority to use deadly force. A reasonable officer could have decided, as Snook did, that the safest thing to do, as David came out of his garage with a pistol at his side, was to wait and see what he did with the pistol before Snook drew attention to himself and potentially escalated the situation by shouting a warning. In conclusion, an officer in Snook's position during the rapidly unfolding events on a dark night reasonably could have believed that the man raising a pistol in his direction was about to shoot him, and the court's precedent establishes that he could respond with deadly force to protect himself. Snook didn't have to wait until David Powell fired his gun to return fire in self-defense. Warnings are not always required before the use of deadly force, and giving a warning in the 1 second between David raising his gun and Snook firing wasn't feasible, according to the court. So that is controlling legal precedent. That is the law in Florida where this new shooting happened. What are the differences between the Airman case and Mr. Powell's case, the Snook case? Well, there's one huge difference. Well, there are a couple of huge differences. Let's start with the biggest one. In the Snook case, the court said it was okay for Snook to fire because he saw the homeowner, who he thought was a dangerous person who had been violent before, literally raising the gun in his direction. Do we have that in the other case? No. The body cam footage shows conclusively that the pistol was pointed at the ground at all relevant times. It was never raised towards the officer. Here, in the Snook case, the court did not say that it was reasonable to shoot him before Mr. Powell started to raise his gun. So there's one huge difference. It may be the same that officers in both cases were given incorrect information. However, in the Snook case, the officers were given incorrect information that was sufficiently more serious, that involved actually shots being fired during a domestic violence incident at the scene. We don't have that in the 23-year-old Airman case in Okaloosa County. All we have is some Karen complaining that she thinks she heard an argument. Not even sure who was arguing. There's no shots fired, no facts like that. There's no indication that a firearm was involved, that anybody might be armed or anybody might be violent, because that information was never relayed to the officer who ultimately fired the shots. It would be less reasonable for him to sort of just shoot immediately upon seeing a gun, because he knew that shots had already been fired. This was a dangerous incident. He knew nothing like that. In Snook, in the 11th Circuit, really is a terrible opinion as well. There are other circuits, such as the 4th Circuit, that grant greater protections to homeowners who are armed with a firearm when the police come up to their residence, no blue lights flashing, no obvious indications that it's the police. One case in particular from 2019, Benton versus Ballou, again from the 4th Circuit, where the cops sort of snuck up on this house and a guy walks out with a shotgun and they end up shooting the guy, and it's ruled by the 4th Circuit to be a bad shoot. Here's what they said. If Officer Ballou or another officer had identified themselves first as members of law enforcement, Officer Ballou reasonably may have believed that Benton's presence, that's the homeowner, while holding a firearm posed a deadly threat to the officers. And had Benton disobeyed a command given by the officers, such as to drop his weapon or to come out with his hands raised, then Officer Ballou reasonably may have feared for his safety upon observing the homeowner holding a gun at his side. Under 4th Circuit precedent, Officer Ballou's failure to employ any of these protective measures rendered his use of force unreasonable. Basically the same fact scenario in the 4th Circuit as opposed to the 11th Circuit. In order for it to be constitutional for the officer to shoot the homeowner who's armed with a gun, for that to be reasonable, the officers should have first identified themselves as members of law enforcement. They should have first given a command and waited for the homeowner to disobey that command, such as to drop his weapon or to come out with his hands raised. Without those, it was not reasonable for the officer to fear for his safety, just by seeing a homeowner in the United States of America armed with a gun with no way of knowing that it was law enforcement outside his home. Therefore, in conclusion, the Okaloosa case was a bad shoot because he gave no warning, and there's no indication from the body cam footage that a warning would not have been feasible. You have a homeowner who's completely innocent, who is not even suspected of having committed any crime. He's allowed to be armed in his home. Somebody's banging on his door. It would be unreasonable for anybody to bang on his door and then shoot him when he's holding a pistol inside his own home in a non-threatening manner. In order to make that reasonable, you would have to.
Yeah, can I get a breakfast crunch wrap sausage?
Orders him to drop the gun, and he refuses to drop the gun, or the officer is responding
And,
to a
some,
known or suspected dangerous location where firearms have been reported, shots have been fired, something like that. Or after the man answers the door, he starts to raise the gun at the officer. But the case is missing any of those facts that would make what the officer did in this case and that case reasonable. Therefore, his actions were unreasonable. Although the Snook case is terrible, in my opinion, from a case law point of view, the Okaloosa case does not even meet the facts of Snook because there is no point, there is no dangerous information like shots fired. These are fact-intensive scenarios. But at the end of the day, if somebody's banging on your door at 3 a.m., you have to be aware of the fact that that very well may be the police. And don't answer the door with a gun, at least not visible to the police officer, because they may shoot you. And if they shoot you, they very well may get away with it, because you can see how complicated the analysis is about whether or not it's constitutional. That means it's ever more likely that even if the courts rule it's unconstitutional, the officer might get qualified immunity if you try to sue him, or if your family members try to sue him. So I hope that helps. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe both here and at the blog at thecivilrightslawyer.com, because you have to go through all of these scenarios individually in order to study what your constitutional rights are and are not. If you have a video review, please use the submission link below. Remember, in America, freedom is scary. Cops need to deal with it. Karens need to deal with it. And hell, the courts need to deal with it.
Timing. We are here. What the fuck am I wearing? I was a civil rights lawyer. What the fuck am I wearing? Oh. Wearing a shirt, man. You don't like my shirt? I'll wear my Ariat tomorrow. Did they? I haven't even looked at it yet. It is a small bag. All right, well, what the fuck's she doing? Okay. All right, see you in a bit. Hopefully I'll be able to get this going. Later. Peace.